Professor Zethkar walked slowly into the human section of Galactic University Station. His 4 legs worked hard against the heavy gravity that humans called normal. The artificial gravity here was set to Earth standards, which meant everything, weighed much more than it should. Around him, students from many different planets moved through the halls. Some floated, some crawled, some walked on different numbers of legs, but none of them moved with the easy confidence that humans showed. His class today had students from 12 different species, but the 3 human exchange students drew the most attention. They sat in the back row of the classroom. They looked calm and relaxed, even though they were in an environment that would kill most other species in just a few hours without the right protection. Professor Zethkar adjusted his environmental suit one more time. The translator on his chest would change his natural clicking sounds into standard galactic language that all students could understand. "Today we will talk about Deathworlds," he announced to the class. His voice came out clear through the translator. "These are planets so dangerous that they work against the growth of complex life." A student from Velia raised one of her crystal tentacles. Her body caught and split the classroom lights into rainbow colors. "Professor, our classification system lists only 47 confirmed Deathworlds in known space. That number seems too small." Professor Zethkar made a thoughtful clicking sound with his mandibles. Actually, recent surveys suggest the number might be even smaller. You see, for a planet to truly count as a Deathworld, it must not only be dangerous, but also be able to produce intelligent life that can travel to other stars despite that danger. A quiet murmur ran through the class. In the back row, one of the humans named Jake Martinez leaned back in his chair. His mouth curved up in what Professor Zethkar had learned was called a smile or grin. Veltar, a gaseous being contained in a special mobility suit, spoke next. "Professor, I have studied the available data on these worlds. The air compositions alone should prevent complex brain development. How does any species achieve space travel from such environments?" Professor Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what his species used as a thinking pause. "That is a very good question. Perhaps we should ask our human colleagues. After all, Earth is classified as a Class 2 Deathworld. That is the highest rating in our system." Every eye, sensor, and detector in the room turned toward the 3 humans. The attention did not seem to bother them at all. If anything, Jake's smile got bigger. "You want to know about Earth?" asked Lisa Chen. She was a small woman, but Professor Zethkar knew that human size meant nothing when it came to their abilities. "Where should we start?" A student from Keltharia leaned forward. His insect-like features twitched with curiosity. "Perhaps with the basics? Your atmospheric composition shows oxygen as a major component. Oxygen is a highly dangerous gas that most species only use in controlled industrial processes." "Oh, that is just the beginning," said the 3rd human, Alex Thompson. He was tall even by human standards. "We breathe oxygen because we have to. Our cells literally burn fuel with it to stay alive. It is so reactive that it makes metal rust and ages our bodies. But without it, we die in just a few minutes." Professor Zethkar watched his students react. Several had moved away from the humans without thinking about it. "But surely," said a young Aquati through her water-filled breathing device, "your world must have other friendly features to make up for this?" The 3 humans looked at each other. Professor Zethkar had learned to recognize something in human faces when they did this. It was amusement mixed with something darker. "Make up for it?" Lisa asked. "I think you do not understand. The oxygen thing is not a design problem we solved. It is just normal for us." "Normal?" The Keltharian student's translator seemed to have trouble with the idea. "What Lisa means," Jake explained in a helpful tone, "is that the oxygen is just everyday life for us. The really interesting stuff is everything else our planet does to try to kill us." A complete silence fell over the classroom. Professor Zethkar realized that this lesson was about to go in a direction he had not planned. "Perhaps," he said carefully. You could tell us more? Alex stood up. Several students pulled back automatically when they saw the tall predator rise to his full height. Professor, do you have access to Earth's geological and weather databases? Of course, but I am not sure what you mean. Pull up the natural disaster records for last year, Alex suggested. Just the major ones. Professor Zethkar worked his claws across his control interface. The room's holographic display showed Earth's data. As the information appeared, he began to understand why the humans looked so amused. The numbers made no sense. They could not possibly be correct. This says your planet had over 14,000 earthquakes of magnitude 4.0 or higher in a single year, he said slowly. This must be an error in the translation. Nope, Jake said cheerfully. And those are just the ones big enough to notice. The small ones happen all the time. Our whole planet's surface is broken into pieces that slide around and crash into each other all the time. The crystal student from Velia was literally shaking with shock. How do you build permanent structures? Very carefully, Lisa replied. And we make everything very strong. Some of our cities are built right on top of major fault lines. But why? The question came from several students at once. Because that is where the good harbors are, Alex explained. Or the fertile valleys, or the mineral deposits. We learned a long time ago that you cannot let a little ground instability stop you from living where you need to live. Professor Zethkar stared at the data flowing across his display. Hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, blizzards, droughts, floods. The list of regular disasters was incredible. Your species, he said slowly, evolved on a planet that is actively trying to kill you. Constantly. Well, Jake said, and his smile became almost predatory. When you put it like that, it sounds almost dangerous. The human exchange students looked at each other and began to laugh. It was a sound that most species found disturbing when they realized it often came before humans started solving problems. Professor, Lisa said once their laughter stopped, you asked how Deathworld species achieve space travel despite their hostile environments. I think you are asking the wrong question. What should I be asking? You should be asking what kind of species a Deathworld creates, Alex replied. Because the answer might explain a few things about why humans have been so adaptable to galactic life. Professor Zethkar looked around his classroom. His other students had wide-eyed, terrified expressions on their faces. Then he looked back at the three relaxed, smiling humans. I believe, he said carefully, that this is going to be a very educational semester. The humans seemed pleased with this response. As they gathered their materials, Professor Zethkar realized he had learned something important today. The question was not just about how life survived on death worlds. The question was about what kind of life such worlds produced. And judging by the reactions of his students, the answer was something the galaxy was not prepared for. 3 days after the first discussion, Professor Zethkar found himself in the university's environmental simulation chamber. He watched his most diverse class ever prepare for what the humans had called practical demonstrations. He was beginning to think he had made a mistake agreeing to this. Are you sure this is safe? Asked Dr. Mirantel, the safety coordinator from Altair. Her 6 eyes moved independently as she watched the chamber's readings. The humans have requested environmental settings that our systems classify as potentially lethal. They told me that these are mild Earth conditions, Professor Zethkar replied. His mandibles clicked nervously. They want to demonstrate what they call a typical Tuesday afternoon. The chamber had been set to Earth normal specifications. The gravity was the crushing 1G that humans preferred. The atmosphere was 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. The temperature was set to 20 degrees Celsius, which most species would consider freezing cold. Most of the non-human students wore full environmental suits. The humans wore what they called casual clothes. These were thin fabric coverings that provided no obvious protection against anything. Jake Martinez stood in the center of the chamber. He held what appeared to be a primitive chemical combustion device. "So this is a campfire," he announced to the group. "It is one of the first technologies humans developed. You are creating an uncontrolled chemical reaction," observed Kelthon, the student from Keltheria. His translator was struggling with concepts of controlled destruction. "For what purpose? Warmth? Cooking food? Light? Social gathering?" Lisa Chen replied. She was adding what humans called kindling to the growing flames. "It is basically controlled fire." "Controlled?" The shout came from about half the class at the same time. "Sure," Alex Thompson said. He casually reached his unprotected hand toward the flames. "See, you just have to respect it." Every safety alarm in Professor Zethkar's brain activated. The human was deliberately moving his flesh within centimeters of temperatures that would instantly destroy most biological materials. "Alex, show them the heat tolerance test," Jake suggested. Alex smiled and picked up a metal rod that had been sitting in the fire. The other end glowed with heat energy. Without any protective equipment, he held it steady. "Humans have developed resistance to heat damage through evolutionary pressure," Lisa explained to the horrified audience. "We can handle direct skin contact with temperatures up to about 60 degrees Celsius for brief periods." Dr. Mirantel's safety readings went off the scale. "That metal is reading 400 degrees Celsius at the heated end." "Right, which is why Alex is holding the cool end," Jake pointed out reasonably. "We are not crazy. That is still 200 degrees. "Yeah, that is getting warm," Alex agreed. He set the rod down. "You learn to judge these things." Professor Zethkar watched his students backing away from the humans as if they had just seen someone casually juggling antimatter. "Perhaps we could move on to something less dangerous," suggested Veltar. His gaseous form was rippling with distress. "Sure," Lisa brightened. "Let us talk about water." She activated the chamber's water system. Liquid water began to flow from a simple opening. To most of the galaxy's species, water was a highly regulated industrial solvent used in controlled applications. The humans cupped their hands under it and brought it directly to their mouths. "You are consuming industrial solvent," the student from Velia stated flatly. "It is good for us," Jake replied, drinking deeply. "We are about 60% water by mass. We need to replace what we lose constantly." "You lose it?" Kelthon's mandibles twitched. "How?" "Sweating, breathing, biological processes," Alex explained. "Watch this." He began what humans called jogging. This was a rhythmic, bouncing way of moving that made no sense to most species' understanding of efficient movement. Within minutes, liquid was visibly coming out of his skin. "He is leaking!" Dr. Mirantel's voice cracked. "It is temperature regulation," Lisa explained calmly. "Our bodies dump excess heat by releasing water and letting it evaporate. Very efficient. Cooling system." "But the energy loss must be enormous," Professor Zethkar objected. "That is why we eat so much," Jake replied. "Speaking of which," he produced what humans called a sandwich. It appeared to be random organic matter pressed between slices of processed plant material. "This contains the flesh of multiple species," he announced cheerfully. "Plant matter that has been ground up and reformed, fermented bacterial cultures, and fruit acids for flavor." The sandwich contained, as far as Professor Zethkar could determine, at least 12 different biological compounds that would be toxic to most galactic species. "The tomatoes alone contain enough acid to damage most beings' internal structures," observed the student from the water world. "We have built up resistance," Alex replied, taking a large bite. "Humans can consume biological compounds that would kill most species. Our digestive systems are basically contained chemical warfare facilities." "And if you encounter something truly dangerous?" asked Veltar. "We have what is called an immune system," Lisa explained. It is a biological military force that lives inside us and fights off foreign invaders. Military force. Absolutely. Specialized attack cells, chemical weapons, surveillance networks, memory banks for identifying repeat threats, Jake listed. Off. We are basically walking biological warfare platforms. The silence that followed was deep and complete. Professor Zethkar realized that his understanding of humans had been completely wrong. He had thought of them as a species that had survived a hostile environment. Looking at his terrified students, and the three cheerful humans casually demonstrating abilities that most species would classify as military grade, he began to understand something much more significant. These are not demonstrations of human survival adaptations, he said slowly. No? Lisa asked innocently. These are demonstrations of human weapons systems. The three humans looked at each other with those expressions again. Professor, Alex said gently, we have not shown you our weapon systems yet. This is just basic biology. Dr. Mirantel's environmental readings showed her life signs going to critical levels. Perhaps, Professor Zethkar suggested weakly, we should continue this discussion in a theoretical context. Sure, Jake agreed easily. But just so you know, tomorrow we were going to demonstrate human recreational activities. Recreational? Sports? Games? Entertainment, Lisa explained. You know, the fun stuff we do when we are not working. Professor Zethkar looked at the burn marks from their controlled fire. He saw the puddles of leaked biological coolant on the floor. He noted the partially consumed multi-species organic matter. Then he tried to imagine what humans might consider fun. I think, he said carefully, we might need to reschedule that demonstration. The humans looked disappointed, but they agreed. As the students left the chamber, Professor Zethkar heard Kelthon speaking to Veltar in quiet tones. Do you think they know how terrifying they are? The answer came from Jake, who apparently had better hearing than anyone realized. Oh, we know. We just think it is cool. Professor Zethkar decided that his next lecture would definitely be theoretical only. He was not sure his students could handle any more practical demonstrations. As he watched the humans walk away, chatting casually about their lunch plans, he realized something important. The galaxy had been thinking about humans all wrong. They were not just survivors of a dangerous world. They were products of a world so dangerous that it had created beings who carried that danger with them wherever they went, and they thought it was normal. Professor Zethkar had spent the weekend reading every piece of human historical data in the Galactic archives. What he found had convinced him that talking about theory was not only better, but absolutely necessary for the mental health of his students. Today we will examine human historical development, he announced to his class. And I want to stress that we will be discussing this from a safe, academic distance. The three human students sat in their usual back row seats. Jake, Lisa, and Alex looked as relaxed as ever. The rest of the class was noticeably more spread out than usual. Several students had chosen seats near the emergency exits. Professor, asked Dr. Yellin, a recently arrived scholar from Zephyr, I have been reviewing the human cultural archives. Their historical records seem to be missing significant periods. Were there data preservation problems? Actually, Lisa replied, turning in her seat. We have pretty good records. What periods are you talking about? Well, there appear to be multiple civilization collapses, dark ages, and what your records call extinction events. But somehow your species continued to develop. The humans exchanged those looks again. Oh, those, Jake said. Yeah, we do not. Really like to think about the bad times. Professor Zethkar pulled up the historical timeline on the display. According to these records, human civilization has experienced about 12 major collapse events. Any one of these should have ended technological development permanently. That seems about right, Alex agreed, though it depends on how you are counting. How I am counting. Professor Zethkar's mandibles clicked rapidly. You are suggesting there were more? Well, those are just the big ones, Lisa explained. There were lots of smaller regional collapses, pandemic events, climate disasters, resource wars. Resource wars? Dr. Yellen's feathers were standing on end. Oh yeah, Jake said casually. Humans fight each other pretty regularly. Over resources, territory, ideas. Sometimes just because we got bored. The classroom fell silent except for the sound of life support systems and several students' panicked breathing. You fight each other? Kelthon asked slowly. As a recreational activity? Not always for recreation, Alex corrected. Sometimes we have real disagreements that can only be settled through applied violence. Professor Zethkar stared at his display. Your records show continuous warfare spanning your entire recorded history. Well, yeah, Lisa said, but that is how we got so good at surviving disasters. Every time civilization collapsed, some humans survived and rebuilt, usually better than before. Better? Dr. Mirantel's safety readings were going off again. How is this possible? Practice, Jake replied simply. See? Each time everything fell apart, we learned from what went wrong. The survivors were the ones who were best at adapting to impossible situations. So repeated civilization collapse actually made your development faster, Professor Zethkar said slowly, trying to understand this concept. Exactly, Alex looked pleased. Evolutionary pressure does not just apply to biology. It works on technology and social systems too. Dr. Yellen's feathers were now fully extended in alarm. But the psychological trauma of repeated near-extinction events should have made technological advancement impossible. Why? Lisa asked, genuinely curious. Because... Dr. Yellen struggled for words. Because no species should be able to function after watching the end of their world. Oh, we got used to it, Jake said cheerfully. Besides, it was not really the end of the world. More like temporary local management changes. Temporary local management changes, Professor Zethkar repeated flatly. Sure. Governments fall, technologies get lost, populations collapse, barbarian invasions happen. But there are always some. Humans somewhere else doing fine, they just show up afterward and rebuild everything. With improvements, Alex added. Each version was generally better than the last. Professor Zethkar pulled up the technological progression charts. According to this data, your species went from basic agriculture to space travel in about 10,000 years. Sounds about right, Lisa agreed. Most species require 50 to 100,000 years for the same development. Well, we had more practice with starting over, Jake explained reasonably. Veltar's gaseous form was rippling with distress. Your species treats civilization collapse as a learning experience? What else would we treat it as? Alex asked. I mean, it is going to happen eventually anyway. Might as well figure out how to handle it gracefully. It is going to happen? Dr. Yellen's voice was climbing toward the ultrasonic range. Oh, absolutely, Lisa said. Civilizations are complex systems, and complex systems eventually fail. That is just entropy. The trick is making sure you fail gracefully and recover quickly. Professor Zethkar realized he was watching something unprecedented in galactic education. An entire classroom of students was having existential crises at the same time. Let me understand this correctly, he said carefully. Your species has developed space travel technology not despite experiencing repeated civilization collapses, but because of them? Basically, Jake confirmed. Each time we had to rebuild, we got better at it. Eventually, we got so good at recovering from disasters that we started looking for ways to make sure the next disaster could not wipe us out completely. Hence space travel, Alex added. Hard to have a total extinction event if you are spread across multiple star systems. And that is why you adapted so quickly to galactic civilization, Professor Zethkar said, pieces clicking into place. You are used to integrating with completely foreign systems and rebuilding your entire society around new circumstances. Exactly, Lisa beamed. Meeting aliens was just like meeting the barbarians who conquered your city, except friendlier and with better technology. Friendlier? The shout came from Dr. Mirantel. Well, you guys did not try to enslave us or steal all our stuff, Jake pointed out. That was a pleasant change. Professor Zethkar looked around his classroom. His students had expressions of pure terror on their faces. Then he looked back at the three humans who were discussing the end of civilization like a minor inconvenience. I think, he said weakly, we need to take a break. Good idea, Alex said, standing up. All this talking about history is making me hungry. Anyone want to grab lunch? The humans headed for the door, chatting casually about food preferences. As soon as they were gone, Dr. Yellin turned to Professor Zethkar. Professor, I request an immediate transfer to a different course. Denied, Professor Zethkar replied automatically, then realized what he had said. I mean, why? Because, Dr. Yellin said in a shaking voice, I have just realized that humans are not just from a death world. They are the death world. Professor Zethkar looked at the door the humans had just walked through. Then he looked at his traumatized students. Then he looked at the historical data still glowing on his display. 10,000 years of continuous warfare, collapse, and reconstruction. Class dismissed, he said quietly. He needed to think about what he had learned today, and possibly update the Galactic Threat Assessment protocols. The data was clear. Humans did not just survive disasters. They used disasters to become stronger. Each collapse made them more adaptable. Each war made them more innovative. Each extinction event made them harder to kill. Professor Zethkar realized that the galaxy had invited something unprecedented to join them. Not just survivors of a death world, but a species that had been forged by thousands of years of constant catastrophe into something that treated the impossible as routine. He wondered if galactic civilization was ready for what that meant. Professor Zethkar had called an emergency meeting with the Galactic University's Council of Experts. The conference room was packed with representatives from a dozen species. All of them had been following the reports from his human studies, course with growing alarm. The situation has become more complex than we first thought, he began. His mandibles clicked nervously as he addressed the group. I believe we may have completely misunderstood the nature of the human species. Dean Morlock was a massive crystalline being from the core worlds. His body resonated with a harmonic of doubt. Professor Zethkar, your report suggests that a single death world species has traumatized an entire classroom of galactic scholars. This seems impossible. I thought so too, Professor Zethkar replied, turning on the holographic display. Until I began comparing human behavior patterns with their historical data. The display showed a three-dimensional chart mapping human expansion through space over the past 2 centuries since first contact. Look at their colonization patterns, Professor Zethkar continued. Humans have established permanent settlements on worlds that no other species would consider livable. Worlds we classified as uninhabitable death traps. Dr. Silara, the representative from the water worlds, rippled with confusion. But surely they changed these worlds first to make them suitable. No, Professor Zethkar said simply. They adapt to them. Within a generation, human colonies are thriving in environments that would kill most of our species in hours. The room fell silent except for the various breathing, humming, and energy cycling sounds of the assembled beings. Furthermore, Professor Zethkar continued, I have discovered that human recreational activities include deliberately exposing themselves to dangerous situations for entertainment purposes. Dean Morlock's harmonic shifted to confusion. Explain. They have activities called extreme sports, where they deliberately place themselves in potentially lethal situations and try to survive them. For fun. For fun? Dr. Silara's voice cracked. Jumping from aircraft, climbing vertical rock faces, riding avalanches, swimming with predatory sea creatures, Professor Zethkar listed. And these are considered normal leisure activities. Dr. Pillion, the psychologist from Keltharia, twitched his mandibles. Professor, you are describing pathological risk-seeking behavior. This should have eliminated the species through natural selection. That is what I thought too, Professor Zethkar agreed. Until I realized what this behavior actually represents. He changed the display to show human technological development curves. Notice how their advancement accelerates during periods of maximum environmental stress. Their most significant technological breakthroughs occur during their wars, disasters, and crises. They advance faster under pressure. Dean Morlock's harmonic was climbing toward alarm. They require pressure, Professor Zethkar corrected. Remove the stress, and human development slows. Add more stress, and they accelerate exponentially. Dr. Pillion's translator was struggling with the concepts. You are suggesting that humans are somehow optimized for chaos? Before Professor Zethkar could answer, the conference room door opened. Jake Martinez walked in, followed by Lisa Chen and Alex Thompson. Sorry we are late, Jake said cheerfully. We heard there was a discussion about human development patterns and thought we might be able to help. The room's life support systems registered sudden spikes in stress hormones from a dozen different species. How did you know about this meeting? Dean Morlock demanded. University information networks are pretty easy to access, Lisa replied innocently. Plus, we noticed that everyone has been acting weird around us lately. Figured you might be talking about us. Easy to access? Dr. Silara's security training was clearly activating. These are encrypted, classified communications. Oh, we did not hack anything, Alex assured her. We just paid attention to behavior patterns and made educated guesses. Basic social intelligence. Professor Zethkar realized that the humans had just demonstrated another terrifying ability. They could predict and infiltrate closed communications, systems through pure observational analysis. Since we are all here, Jake continued, settling into a chair that groaned under Earth-normal bone density, why do not you just ask us directly whatever you want to know? Dean Morlock's crystalline structure was visibly shaking with stress. We are trying to understand why your species appears to be unusual in its developmental patterns. Unusual how? Lisa asked. Your technological advancement rate, your adaptation, speed, your apparent comfort with catastrophic change, Dr. Pillion listed. Most species require stability to develop. You seem to require the opposite. The three humans looked at each other. Professor Zethkar recognized that particular exchange of glances by now. Oh, Alex said slowly. You want to understand why we are like this? Can you explain it? Professor Zethkar asked. Jake leaned back in his chair, which made several security officers reach for their emergency equipment. It is really pretty simple, he said. Earth is a death world, right? But here is the thing. It is not just that our planet tries to kill us. It is that our planet is really, really good at trying to kill us. I do not understand the difference, Dean Morlock admitted. Most hostile environments are consistently hostile, Lisa explained. Predictably dangerous. You can adapt to predictable. But Earth? Alex grinned. Earth is creative. Creative? Dr. Silara repeated weakly. New disasters, new diseases, new ways for the environment to try to kill us, Jake listed. Climate changes, magnetic pole reversals, supervolcano eruptions, asteroid impacts, ice ages, mass extinctions. Our planet does not just try to kill us, Lisa continued. It keeps trying new and innovative ways to kill us. So we had to get good at adapting to things we had never seen before, Alex finished. Really good. And really fast. Professor Zethkar felt something clicking into place in his understanding. "You evolved to handle novelty," he said slowly. "We evolved to handle impossibility," Jake corrected. "When the impossible becomes routine, you stop seeing it as impossible. Which is why," Lisa added, "joining galactic civilization was not that big a deal. We have been dealing with impossible situations our entire evolutionary history." "And why you adapt so quickly to new worlds," Professor Zethkar continued, understanding flooding through him. "And why we get bored without challenges," Alex said. "A species that evolved under constant pressure feels weird when the pressure stops." Dean Morlock's harmonic had shifted to what Professor Zethkar recognized as existential dread. "Professor Zethkar," the dean said slowly, "I believe we need to update our classification system." "Sir?" "Earth is not just a class toti the Deathworld," Dean Morlock continued. "It is something we have never encountered before. It is a death world that produces species capable of thriving in any environment, including ones they have never seen. Adaptive death world survivors," Dr. Pillion breathed. "Is that a problem?" Lisa asked innocently. Professor Zethkar looked around the room at the terrified expressions of some of the galaxy's most advanced species. Then he looked back at three cheerful humans who had just casually explained why they were essentially unstoppable. "No," he said carefully. "I do not think it is a problem at all." "Good," Jake said, standing up. "Because we really like it here. Galactic civilization is fun. Lots of new challenges to figure out." As the humans left the conference room, chatting casually about their plans for the afternoon, Professor Zethkar realized that the galaxy had just learned something very important about itself. They were not just sharing space with a Death World species. They were sharing space with a species that had been forged by a Death World so creative, so relentlessly innovative in its hostility, that it had produced beings who saw the impossible as merely another Tuesday. "Professor," Dean Morlock said, quietly, "I believe we should revise our assessment protocols." "Yes, sir. And perhaps," the dean continued, "we should be very, very glad that humans seem to like us." Professor Zethkar thought about Jake's casual comment about barbarian invasions being less friendly than first contact with galactic civilization. "Yes, sir," he agreed fervently. "Very glad indeed." 2 weeks later, Professor Zethkar stood before the largest assembly in Galactic University's history. Representatives from over 300 species had gathered, either in person or through quantum communication links, to hear what was being called the Human Report. The 3 human students sat in the front row now, no longer relegated to the back. Jake, Lisa, and Alex looked as relaxed as ever. Professor Zethkar noticed they had dressed in what humans called formal wear for the occasion. They still wore no visible protective equipment, but their fabric coverings were slightly more elaborate. "Colleagues," Professor Zethkar began, his voice carrying across the vast amphitheater. 3 months ago, we thought we understood the nature of Deathworld species. We believed that hostile environments produced hardy survivors, beings who could endure where others could not. A ripple of agreement ran through the assembled species. "We were wrong," he continued. "Earth did not produce hardy survivors. Earth produced something far more significant." He activated the main holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of known space. Earth produced adapters, beings who do not just survive in hostile environments, they transform hostile environments into advantages. The display zoomed in on human colony worlds, showing settlements thriving in conditions that would challenge most species' best technology. "Consider the human colony on Kepler 442b," Professor Zethkar continued. "A world with surface gravity, 2.3 times Earth normal, atmospheric pressure that would crush most beings, and surface temperatures that change 200 degrees between day and night cycles. The colony was established 18 months ago," he went on. "Today, it is one of the most productive mining operations in the sector, not because humans changed the world to suit them, because they adapted to it. Jake raised his hand. Actually, Professor, the gravity thing turned out to be really useful for mining operations. Makes the ore settle faster in the processing units. And the temperature swings are great for thermal power generation, Lisa added. Very efficient. Plus, the high atmospheric pressure means our sealed living domes are incredibly stable, Alex noted. Best structural integrity we have ever achieved. Professor Zethkar watched the assembled representatives process this information, conditions that would require massive technological solutions for any other species were simply useful features to humans. But this adaptability extends beyond physical environments, he continued. Observe human integration patterns in galactic society. The display shifted to show economic and social data. Humans have been part of galactic civilization for less than 3 centuries. In that time, they have become essential partners to species with millions of years of spacefaring experience. Ambassador Kelktar of the Trade Federation appeared via hologram. Professor, human merchant vessels now handle about 30% of intersystem commerce. They accept shipping contracts to destinations that other species consider too dangerous or unprofitable. Because those routes are more interesting, Jake explained cheerfully. Regular shipping runs get boring after a while. Boring, Ambassador Kelktar repeated. They consider safe, profitable trade routes to be boring. Well, yeah, Lisa said. If there is no challenge, what is the point? Professor Zethkar nodded. This brings us to the most significant aspect of human psychology. They do not just adapt to new challenges. They actively seek them out. Dr. Vennick, the eminent psychologist from Altair attending via Quantum Link, spoke up. Professor, this behavior pattern suggests an addiction to stress responses. This should be psychologically damaging. That is what we thought too, Professor Zethkar agreed. Until we examined the data more carefully, the display showed comparative psychological health metrics. Humans show optimal mental health indicators when facing moderate to high stress situations. Remove all stress, and they begin to show depression, anxiety, and decreased cognitive function. They are psychologically optimized for crisis management, Dr. Vennick breathed. More than that, Professor Zethkar continued. They are psychologically dependent on it. Alex nodded. Yeah, that sounds about right. Peace and quiet makes us weird. Weird how? Dr. Vennick asked. Restless, cranky, we start looking for problems to solve, Lisa replied. It is much better when there are actual problems to work on, which explains their rapid integration into galactic society, Professor Zethkar said. Galactic civilization provided an endless series of new problems, new challenges, new environments to master. And why they have become so valuable as partners, Ambassador Kelktar added. When we encounter a situation that seems impossible to handle, we ask the humans. They seem to enjoy impossible situations. Love them, Jake confirmed. Impossible. Just means no one has figured out how to make it possible yet. Professor Zethkar paused, looking out at the assembly. This brings us to the real question. What does this mean for galactic civilization? The amphitheater fell silent. 300 species, millions of years of combined spacefaring experience, and we have built a stable, peaceful, prosperous galactic community, he continued. It works because we have eliminated most sources of chaos, unpredictability, and existential threat. And then we invited humans to join us, he concluded. Is that a problem? Dean Morlock asked, his crystalline form shaking with uncertainty. Professor. Zethkar looked at the 3 humans, who were listening with interested expressions. 2 weeks ago, I would have said yes, he replied. Humans represent a fundamentally destabilizing influence on our carefully balanced system. But, Ambassador Kelktar prompted. But I have realized that our system has a flaw we never recognized. Professor Zethkar continued. It is optimized for stability, but it is not optimized for growth. We have eliminated most challenges which means we have eliminated most opportunities for advancement. The display shifted to show comparative technological development curves. Human technological advancement has accelerated since joining galactic civilization. But more significantly, so has everyone else's. The human colonies do not just succeed in hostile environments. They make breakthroughs that benefit everyone. Human merchants do not just handle dangerous routes. They open up new markets that other species could not access. Human researchers do not just solve difficult problems. They ask questions the rest of us never thought to ask. They are catalysts, Dr. Vennick said slowly. They are the chaos that prevents stagnation, Professor Zethkar agreed. Earth did not just produce a species that could survive anything. It produced a species that makes everything else evolve faster. Dean Morlock's harmonic shifted to what Professor Zethkar recognized as cautious optimism. So your recommendation, Professor? Zethkar looked once more at Jake, Lisa, and Alex, who gave him encouraging smiles. My recommendation is that we stop thinking of humans as an anomaly to be understood and start thinking of them as a gift to be appreciated, he said. They are exactly what galactic civilization needed, exactly when we needed it. Even though they are terrifying? Asked Dr. Vennick. Especially because they are terrifying, Professor Zethkar replied. Fear of stagnation should be more frightening than fear of change. Jake stood up, and only about half the assembly flinched this time. Professor, if I may? He asked. Of course. You have all been really great about making us feel welcome here, Jake said, addressing the assembly. We know we are weird by your standards, but you gave us a chance anyway. And we want you to know, Lisa added, also standing, that we are not here to break your civilization. We are here to help it grow, Alex finished, joining his colleagues. Even though that might be uncomfortable sometimes, Jake admitted. Growth usually is, Lisa said. But it is worth it, Alex concluded. Trust us on that one. We have experience with uncomfortable growth. Professor Zethkar watched 3 members of a species forged by the most creative Deathworld in known space offer reassurance to an assembly of beings who had built a peaceful galaxy through careful avoidance of the very chaos that made humans thrive. Questions? He asked the assembly. Silence stretched for long moments. Then Ambassador Kelktar spoke. Just one. Humans, what do you need from us to help galactic civilization grow? The 3 humans exchanged those looks again. Just keep being yourselves, Jake said finally. Keep building cool stuff, exploring new places, asking interesting questions. And when you run into something impossible, Lisa added, give us a call. We specialize in impossible. Alex finished with a grin. Professor Zethkar realized that his academic career had just taken a turn he never could have expected. He was no longer studying an unusual species. He was documenting the birth of a new kind of galactic civilization. Class dismissed, he said, though this time he meant something much larger than his biology course. As the assembly dispersed, beings from hundreds of worlds carrying the knowledge that they shared the galaxy with a species that thrived on the impossible, Professor Zethkar reflected on what he had learned. The question had never been why Earth was a death world. The question was what kind of beings such a world would create, and what they would do to the galaxy once they were set loose in it. Now he knew, and despite everything, he found himself looking forward to finding out what impossible thing the humans would make possible next.